I'm Joshua Bardwell, and you're going to learn something today. Today we are revisiting the 6S versus 4S question. And unlike the last time where I was just kind of like, hey, I'm in Orlando, let's do some freestyle with Drew. What batteries are in stock at Race Day Quads? Who cares? Let's just fly. And I am putting back on my lab coat and my safety glasses and going to do a little bit more of a fair comparison. Yes, I do know what watt hours are. Sometimes I just don't care, but today's not that day. Here's what we got today. In this corner, Race Day Quads, 1050 milliamp hour 6S battery, about 23 watt hours of energy. And in this corner, Race Day Quads, 4S, 1500 milliamp hour batteries, about 22 watt hours of energy. About as close as a fair comparison could possibly be. The 1500 4S, 191 grams. The 1050 6S, 16 grams heavier. Now, it kind of makes sense that the 6S is just a little bit heavier because, as we can see, 23.31 watt hours. The 6S is just a little bit bigger than the 4S at 22.2 watt hours. But as far as what we can actually purchase and use, this is as close as it's going to get. Another thing we have to acknowledge is that the C rating of these batteries are not identical. This is a 90C 1050 milliamp hour, and this is a 100C 1500 milliamp hour. The actual amps that they can deliver is going to be different because of the size of the cell is different, and the number of watts they can deliver, which is another thing entirely, is going to be different. But the bottom line is that these are two of the closest performing packs we could possibly get. The exact same manufacturer, the exact same, they even kind of look almost like they're a similar size, so we just have to kind of take that in stride. Here are the quads that we're going to be using. This is my JB Perfect Freestyle build, moved from the Chameleon TI over to the Marmot frame. Here's the 4S quad, and here's the 6S quad. They are almost identical. One of them has race wire, one of them doesn't, and this one does have a 3D printed camera cage, whereas this one doesn't because I just don't have one. Let's see how much of a difference that makes in their weight. 6S quad weighs 356 grams. The 4S quad weighs 359 grams. Oh, that is really close. It's just 359. 3 grams. Wow. Okay, so that's as near as makes no difference in terms of weight. Now, there's one more thing that we have to take into account here, and that's the kV of the motors. The motor kV is 2500 kV on 4S, and that means that's an equivalent of 1650 kV on 6S to produce the exact same RPM. These are 1750 kV motors, and that's going to mean they have an equivalent of 2651 kV on 4S. So in other words, these 6S motors are 2651 out of 2500 are 6% faster. So here's how we're going to address that. We're going to go into a Betaflight. We're going to go to the CLI. Yeah. We're going to set the motor output limit to 96%. No, 94%, you doofus. 94%. And that should do as much as we can realistically hope to do to equalize the kV of these motors. We should acknowledge, though, that the actual kV of motors may vary by as much as, let's say, plus or minus 25 kV. I don't know exactly the number, but when you buy like a 1750 kV motor, nobody at the factory is like testing every single one to be sure they're exactly 1750 kV, and there's some manufacturing tolerances and variances. So anyway, let's just take these numbers at roughly their word. Props we're going to be using are Gemfan 5149s. These are, I found, the best handling props to use on my JB 2407 motors. They have enough thrust and enough carve to really, I don't know, they just seem to work really well. They are a little hard on the battery, and for a minute I thought about using a lower pitch prop to try and make life easier on the batteries, but then I thought, hey, if 6S is going to have an advantage, it might be in the case, let's not go easy on the quads, let's make them work. So that's what we're going to do. I've just realized that there's 4 flights, 2 on 4S, 2 on 6S. It's about 10 or 11 minutes of total flight time, and most people are going to get bored and tune out if I just dump the flights in the video here. But I do want you guys to be able to watch the whole flight for the 20% of you who actually want to sit through it. So I'm going to put that at the end of the video. Right this minute, though, let's look at this graph of battery voltage and see how they compare. And I made the same graph when I did the 1250 versus 1500 milliamp hour unequal watt hour test. And in that test, the 6S battery consistently held about, say, 0.2 volts higher voltage. But was that just because it was a bigger battery? Here's the answer. And the answer seems to be yes. In fact, this chart shows the voltage of the 4S and the 6S packs over the course of the flight. The blue shades are the 4S packs. The orange shades are the 6S packs. And what I did here is I flew to a certain freestyle song. The idea was that although this is not a perfectly repeatable bench test, by flying to the same song and kind of doing roughly the same moves, it would give a little bit of consistency to the different flights. Anyway, what we see is that the voltage it really depends on where exactly the throttle was at the moment that I took the point, but it's pretty close. I don't think there's a clear, consistent winner here. Like at this exact moment, this 4S is sagging, right? And the 6S's are a little bit higher, but, well, I guess you could probably say there's more times when the 6S is higher than the 4S than the other way around. It seems like the 6S does have a slight edge, especially at the beginning of the pack. Was I just going easier for the 6S packs? It's too hard. You'll have to watch the flight footage and judge for yourself. Hey guys, Joshua from the future here. I thought of a way to test that, not just sort of eyeball it. So what I got here is this column is the sum of the 4S voltage minus the sum of the 6S voltage. In other words, if this is a positive number, then the 4S's had more volts at that point in time. If this is a negative number, then the 6S had more volts at that point in time. And when we graph that, you can see that, yes, in fact, especially toward the beginning of the pack, the 6S's had an edge, and toward the end of the pack, the 4S's seem to have sort of pulled it away. And in general, if you sum those numbers up, the 6S's held voltage just a little bit more. And that's especially relevant because if you look, because these were charged on 2 different chargers, and just because they're different packs, there was a tiny difference in their starting voltage. The 4S's actually had a slightly higher starting voltage, just by like 20 millivolts, not that much. But so, okay, anyway. And we see right here that the 2 6S's, especially toward the end of the pack, seem to be having a much lower voltage than the 4S's. And the 4S's then rebound to around 3.7 volts, and this is interesting. The 6S's do not rebound nearly as hard. They stay down around 3.65, and this one's even lower, 3.58 volts. Okay, so the 6S's flown the same amount of time were at a lower voltage and therefore discharged more energy than the 4S's. Interesting. Now, another question we could ask is, could I have flown longer on the 4S's than the 6S's? I stopped when the song ended, but what if I had wanted to keep going? And I would say on the 6S's, no, I was pretty close to done. Look, the 6S was hitting 3.5 volts, 3.54 volts. I'm not going to be pushing much below this because I will destroy the pack. On the 4S's, though, I was up around 3.6. I possibly would have kept going a little longer, although you can see right here it drops to 3.56. I think both of these packs were pretty close to done, but we can't deny that the 4S packs were about 0.1 volts higher than the 6S packs at the same amount of time. Here's another big difference between the 6S and the 4S packs. So here's one of the 6S 1050s that I used for this flight, and if we plug it into this balance checker, we can see the actual cell voltage. Remember that the Betaflight OSD has no way of knowing the actual voltage of the individual cells. It just takes the total pack voltage and divides it by the number of cells, and that's what you see in the OSD. And that means that when a pack is becoming unbalanced, You actually won't know that from the Betaflight OSD. And if we look here, we can see 3.7, 365, 361. There's as much as there's as much as a 0.1 volt difference in these cells. This is a significant imbalance in the cells and suggests, well, I'm not sure what it suggests, might mean that the internal resistance of these cells was not very well matched. I don't know. Let's check the other one. If we check the other one, 375, 367, 377, 371, 365, 374, 365. Yeah, again, we have as much as a 0.1 volt delta between the lowest and the highest cell. And that's going to affect our ability to fly on this, because we may have an average cell voltage of, say, 3.5 volts, but one of the cells may be down at 3.4, and that's going to affect, eventually that one cell is going to sag out or take damage or perform worse. By comparison, if we take one of the 4-cell packs and we check it, we can see it is 0.02 volts basically difference, 0.023 I guess. It is a much more balanced and much more evenly matched pack. And I don't know whether that has something to do with the fact this is 4S or 6S. I also don't know whether this is just this particular 6S pack or whether other 6S packs might have the same issue. It could be nice to check the 1250 and see if the 1250 had the same issue. I don't know all of that stuff, but it is certainly something to point out that these particular packs, both of them were very imbalanced at the end, whereas the 4S was much better balanced, and that may contribute to a better performance of the 4S and a worse performance of the 6S. So now it's time for you guys to watch the flights and see whether you think there's any difference you can see in just how the quad flies on 4S versus 6S. Before I do that, like I said, I know a lot of you guys aren't going to stick around for 11 minutes of my amazing freestyle. So let me give you my conclusions, and then you can watch the video. The flight time difference between 6S and 4S. Some pilots have said, oh, I get like almost double the flight time. I have never seen that, and this test certainly doesn't bear that out. It continues to support my claim that 6S doesn't give significantly longer flight time unless you're willing to run the 6S packs significantly lower. The thing is, at the end of this flight, the 6S packs, I still didn't feel any sag, whereas on the 4S packs, I could tell if I hit the throttle, I could start to feel the sag. I think that people who are reporting much longer flight times on 6S they must be running the batteries lower, or they must be using bigger batteries. That's consistent with what I've said in the past. As far as the voltage goes, we can see that there isn't a compelling advantage for 6S over 4S. In fact, 4S did a little bit better toward the end of the pack. Perhaps that's because the 6S packs were becoming unbalanced and some of the cells were not performing as well as they could. Maybe a better 6S pack would have done a better job in this case. Here's where it gets murky though, because performance-wise, I can absolutely tell you when I took the 6S quad out, the very first time I did a sort of a punch and a flick, boom, it felt so much more responsive than it did on 6S than it did on 4S. It just felt like I was flying a slightly different quad. That's not something I can show you in a graph. I can just report that the feel is definitely better on 6S. Here's the last question I want to answer. And we're not going to be able to tackle this today, but I want to tackle it someday. 1250 6S is better than 1500 4S. I mean, that's a given. And I know that to some of you that's obvious because 1250 6S is just a bigger battery. And so you're like, well, of course it is. But remember, not everybody used to be convinced of that. So that's back when I tested 1250 6S versus 1500 4S. That was kind of the hypothesis. So it's better. And it's better because it's a bigger battery. But then how does 1800 4S fly? Because I've flown 1800 milliamp hour 4S batteries before and I didn't like them. I thought they were too heavy and it wasn't worth the extra weight. So why don't I feel that way about 1250 6S? The answer is to buy a Race Day Quads 1800 milliamp hour 4S and test it against one of these guys. 1800 milliamp, oh, sold out. So that's why we're not testing this one today. It's been out of stock for as long as I've been making this video, and I don't want to hold the video any longer. But I want to fly the 1800 4S against the 1250 6S and see. Maybe it's just I haven't flown an 1800 4S in so long, they've just gotten better. I mean, that's going to be a real eye-opener. But that's what science is all about. And if the results don't bear out, you do the tests, you look at the results, and then you make your decision based on the evidence. And that's what we'll do. Here are the flights. I've got some commentary in between the flights, and you can just watch these 4 flights and see if you feel like there's any significant difference between them. Thank you guys so much for watching. Happy flying. I don't know why I paused there. All right, guys, here's the real challenge of doing this kind of testing. We could just put these batteries on the bench on my battery test machine and then just see how they perform under a constant load. That would be the most like apples to apples, but it wouldn't tell us anything about how they perform in the air, and that's really what I think I'm more interested in exploring. So I'm going to fly these 2 packs. I got 2 packs, 2 4S, 2 6S. I'm going to fly 4 total packs. I'm going to put a certain song on that I like to fly to. I'm not going to make any particular attempt to fly differently during each of the packs. I'm going to put the DVR on screen so you guys can see exactly how the amps and the volts are performing. And then at the end, we'll look at it together and we'll see what we thought.
What can it be that calls me to this place today? This lawless car ballet. What can it be? Am I a baby pigeon sprouting wings to soar? Was that a metaphor for something more? And now I'm flying, my spirit's climbing as I'm caught through this fog of maze. Ooh, my body, my spirit aligning in this place called Slaughter. What would you say if it turns out that I stay? Would it be okay here in this place? 'Cause you know that I love these falling wires, dumpster fires, burning tires, everything that I desire, everything that I desire. Now I'm flying, my spirit's climbing as I'm caught through this fog of maze. Ooh, my body, my spirit aligning in this place called Slaughter. I know I should go, but I really don't want to yet. I really don't want to yet. I know I should go, but I really don't want to yet. I really don't want to yet. There's nothing like Slaughter. It's all here in Slaughter Base. All here in Slaughter Base. All here in Slaughter Base. It's all here in Slaughter
I actually really like that song. for freestyle, I was watching. That's from Wreck-It Ralph 2. Ralph Wrecks the Internet. And when that song came on the credits, I was like, oh, I got to freestyle to this. And then I played it in the car with Alex Vanover, and he was like, oh, this is good. And I was like, oh, yeah, you like it? And I felt good because, I'm old. So, when the young generation thinks I'm listening to good music, I'm like, yeah, I'm not so old. And then he used it in a freestyle video from that exact trip before, and he did better than me because he's an awesome pilot and I'm a mediocre pilot. And
Am I a baby pigeon sprouting wings to soar? Was that a metaphor for something more?
now I can't use it anymore. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't play your favorite freestyle song in the car with Vanover because he will gank it. He will take it. It's okay, I'm not mad. It was a good video he did. He looked good. Can't even listen to that song anymore without thinking of how much better he is than me. Mamba. Oh, who's a good dog?
What can it be that calls me to this place today? This lawless car ballet. What can it be? Am I a baby pigeon sprouting wings to soar? Was that a metaphor for something more? Now I'm flying, my spirit's climbing as I'm caught through this fog of maze. My body, my spirit aligning in this place called slaughter. What would you say if it turns out that I stay? Would it be okay here in this place? 'Cause you know that I love these falling wires, dumpster fires, burning tires, everything that I desire, everything that I desire. Now I'm flying, my spirit's climbing as I'm caught through this fog of maze. My body, my spirit aligning in this place called slaughter. I know I should go, but I really don't want to yet. I really don't want to yet. I know I should go, but I really don't want to yet. I really don't want to yet. There's nothing like it's on here in slaughter base. Yeah. On here in slaughter base. Yeah. On here in slaughter base. It's on here in slaughter base.
Alrighty, here go the 6S packs. This is as absolutely equal as I could possibly make things. The only thing you might think about criticizing, who am I kidding? You'll think of something to criticize. The only thing you might think about criticizing is this is not a double blind because I don't have any friends here to set the quads up for me, so that I don't know which one I'm flying. So there you go. But let's fly some 6S. I tell you, it definitely feels different. It feels most different in the punch. When I was doing those punches at the very beginning of the flight, the flicks, it had a lot more punch to really accelerate into the flick. Remember that we have decreased the kVA of the motor output to make it sort of as close as we can get, so I don't think that's the explanation, but there you go. All right, let's do one more.
What can it be that calls me to this place today? This lawless car ballet. What can it be? Am I a baby pigeon sprouting wings to soar? Was that a metaphor for something more? And now I'm flying, my spirit's climbing as I'm caught through this fog of maze. Ooh, my body, my spirit aligning in this place called slaughter. What would you say if it turns out that I stay? Would it be okay here in this place? 'Cause you know that I love these falling wires, dumpster fires, burning tires, everything that I desire, everything that I desire. Now I'm flying, my spirit's climbing as I'm caught through this fog of maze. Ooh, my body, my spirit aligning in this place called slaughter. I know I should go, but I really don't want to yet. I really don't want to yet. I know I should go, but I really don't want to yet. I really don't want to yet. There's nothing like it's on here in slaughter race. Yeah, I'm here in slaughter race. Yeah, I'm here in slaughter race. It's on here in slaughter race.
All right, folks, are you sick of that song yet? I'm not. I love that song. I could listen to it a million times. Thank you. If you're still here, thank you for sticking around. Hope you found this useful. It's going to do it for this video. Thanks for watching. Happy flying.